Comrades, I've been humbly requesting for your attention, but it seems as if you want us to take drastic measures. I think if all the most important people are here, we can proceed. Can the audience please settle down?
Your life, say hi to your people.
I am Johannes from the Republic of Botswana. I'm going to be your chair for this final. My apologies to the fish from Belcom or Virginia. And the Ndlovu came from Johannesburg. Provisumba from Bulawayo. And then Catherine
from Thomasgal.
Okay, I take it that all the teams are ready for us to start, because as soon as I sit down, I'm calling on the Prime Minister to start the final under the motion which reads, this House believes that Namibia should adopt an aggressive land expropriation and redistribution. I hope I've captured it correctly, but the essence is the same. The people who matter the most have the motion, so yes. Anam, who is the Okay, we're still waiting on Lindo, and then I'll be calling on the Prime Minister.
Except
Lehaku Masedi will be our timekeeper.
Ivan. Yeah, bro, I don't know.
Hey, fishy.
It's dangerous.
Yo. Briga, say hi to your people, they're watching you. It's live nationals here. Yeah.
If you don't have any intention of paying attention, please leave the room before we start. Without any further delay, I would like to welcome the Prime Minister to start the debate of the motion which reads, this House believes that Namibia should adopt an aggressive form of land expropriation and redistribution.
Law for law. Let's hear those Article 16 bars.
Namibia is a country that exists on the tension that existed during the time of colonialism. As a result of colonialism, it has resulted in white individuals having acquired more than 60% of the land within Namibia. We think it's very important that individuals in Namibia have an opportunity to access this land. We say the policies that exist at the moment don't necessarily allow for that to happen, and we'll show that in today's debate. So first, let's in characterization. What's the issue with the current stance of the Namibian government and legislature with regards to taking of land or accessing of land? First issue, the willing buyer, willing seller policy. In Namibia, under the Agricultural Reform Act in itself, specifically states that you can only access the land where an individual is willing to sell that land. So a white farmer is only obliged to sell that land upon the instance that they are willing to do so. We see this presents a problem within the status quo. Why? Because these individuals are almost always not likely to give up this land. And it's shown particularly that only 5 pieces of land have been expropriated within that regard. We say secondly, we've seen that the idea of having aggressive forms of engagement with regards to land to be more successful in the Namibian context. We say particularly when Job Amupanda, who is the leader of this particular movement we're talking about, said that we need to rise up as the youth. More than 1,000 youth were marching in the streets of Kaptura, claiming and wanting this particular land. We say after that, it forced the particular state and the municipality to allocate land to the individuals because they understood that these aggressive forms of engagement are the ones that push their hands more. Third point of contextualization. Namibia exists on the butt of the highest inequality rates in the world. We say in Namibia, there's a big divide between individuals who have access to land in itself and to money in general, and those who don't have those particular things. We say we need to have a policy that uniquely provides an opportunity for individuals to access these particular things because it's not possible in the status quo. Fourth point of contextualization. 60% of the 50% that's owned by white farmers is owned by absentee farmers. So these are white German farmers that are there in Europe, and all they care about is where they are at the moment. And that land cannot be expropriated under the status quo because of the willing buyer, willing seller policy. We say there's no aggressive form of engagement with regards to those individuals. And by virtue of that, they get to keep their land, even if they're in foreign countries. And it's important that we remedy that particular thing. We're coming down to our policy. We say that we are willing, and what we seek to achieve in today's debate is to reform the Agricultural Land Reform Act by taking away the idea of willing buyer, willing seller. We want to replace it with a model as adopted in Ghana, where we offer you an amount of money at a competitive market price. And in the instance that you don't accept this particular competitive market price, we will expropriate that particular land. We say this is particularly fundamentally important in today's debate. Why? Because the problem and what happened in Zimbabwe is that white people were completely excluded from the system, and that allowed for the system to just fall apart. We are allowing particular here for engagement to occur within the system between white people and the judiciary. And it doesn't make these individuals feel alienated because they still get the value of their land. And when we talk about the value of the land, it's not when you acquire that land, but what the value is at the moment. So what we tell you particularly as well, this is followed by a model and a policy of redistribution. We say that we provide this particular land to individuals who have shown a consistent track record and eagerness to farm within this particular land Is it by way of accessing loans, or individuals who have a fundamental need for the land because they are too poor? So we'll give portions of land for individuals who just want to farm in cabbage because they just want to eat something. We'll give portions of land to individuals who want to farm on a commercial scale, but those individuals will then be held to a higher standard because we need to ensure that this land is used for productive means. How do we ensure this in particular? We state that on every 5-year period, there will be a review of what you have done with that particular land. You will be graded and be assessed, and you have not made any progress with regards to that land and how you are developing it. We will take that land back, and we will expropriate it and give it to another individual who is willing to do what needs to be done with that particular land.
Shangadi, how aggressive is simply not paying a farmer?
We're telling in today's debate, our criteria for aggressive repossessing of that particular land is that we first allow you the opportunity for compensation. Because that's aggressive in the nature of Namibia in itself. See that you don't understand. Aggressive in the nature of Namibia in itself. Because that doesn't happen within the status quo. And we are passive in terms of engagement. Because the moment that a white farmer says, no, I want to sell this land, it stops there. So going into the first point of argumentation here, which is the legitimacy of expropriation. We say firstly, the land and how it was acquired. We say prior to the genocide of the Herero people, they occupied and made part of 60% of Namibia's population. Now they make up 20%. The land that they occupied between the areas of Okaranja is now solely owned by white farmers. We say by virtue of the fact and on the grounds that this land was acquired, which is immoral, we don't think they have a legitimate claim as white farmers to say this land is ours. We say by virtue of that, it's moral for the government in this regard to take that particular land because of nature it was taken. Secondly, access of ancestral land. We say a lot of these particular farms exist on burial sites, inherited sites of indigenous people. We say they hold these things particularly strong to themselves and how they identify, but don't have access to these particular things because of the nature of how policies exist within this instance. We say by aggressive expropriation land, we allow individuals a unique opportunity to exist within those ancestral lands. I think that's fundamentally important to them and how they exist within those societies. Secondly, what has this particularly done with the absence of access to ancestral land? It has increased racial tension between indigenous groups and white farmers within that particular case because they feel that they are being denied access to the land of their ancestors. We say by forms of aggressive policy, where now, for this racial tension, we minimize within that regard because individuals have been compensated to a certain extent. We say historically Namibia exists on the backbone of colonialism, and we need to deconstruct that particular thing, and our model best achieves that. With that said, I thank you.
Shangadi, can you twist that thing? That thing that's spinning, can you twist it? That grey thing, can you, yeah, that thing. Yeah, can you turn it, can you move it or something? It can't move. Dielena. Like it can't lie flat or something. Yeah. Yeah, let it lie flat. Yeah.
Prime Minister, I would like to welcome the leader of opposition to respond.
Okay, so this is where Shangadi misses the whole plot, right? So when he talks of aggression, he talks of first the passive approach, one that this group of people have a problem with. So certainly that mischaracterization of what the movement demands and needs is actually quite discerning and quite disingenuous in this motion, right? But then let us take him at his word, right? And best that's going to happen, let us say that all farmers refuse. Let's assume that all farmers refuse and land is expropriated. Let me show you how he defeats these people yet again, right? He says, after a 5-year review, because you were assessed because of track record and need. But then lastly, if you have accessed loans. So now it creates the same elitist environment of farming. If you have had access to loans, we'll give you the commercial farms. We'll give you the big farms, the nice ones with the grand millions. But then if you're hungry, we'll give you the cabbage patch. So at the end of the day, the same elitist mentality that comes with land ownership exists within their method. So at the end of the day, that in itself is self-defeating. But then the last mechanism he mentions is that if you do not perform in 5 years the duty of that land, then we will retake that land from you and plunge you into poverty, because that's how he characterizes these people, that they are poor. So at the end of the day, even the owner of the cabbage patch is susceptible to being plunged back into not having a cabbage. So at the end of the day, we're saying that is disingenuous and should not be agreed on in this motion. He must come and contextualize, because the inequality that exists in the status quo exists then in their policy, and the elitist nature exists, and that's what we're going to challenge in our positive matter. So moving on to that, right? So one of our harms that we'd like to show you, right, is when the march happened with 1,000 youth, there was marauding land grabbers, right? So at the end of the day, we do need to consider the harm of the marauding hordes who want to live outside the law and not necessarily respect the auspices of the law because of the passive nature of the law. So because of the passive nature of their proposal, the marauding land grabbers are still an imminent harm, and at the end of the day, that harm must also be considered. But secondly, right, aggression in expropriation without compensation begets aggression. And what is the aggression that comes from that initial aggression? Is the aggression from the international market. When Robert Mugabe aggresses his farmers and says, I'm going to expropriate you without pay, the aggression is to sanction products that are farm related, that come from that country. So the plight of poverty is not alleviated. The Ghanaian example still moves on those auspices that there are limitations to what the Ghanaians can export. So what do? You give someone land, but you do not give them the opportunity to rise from the poverty, which is the prime directive that we are given this evening, right? So at the end of the day, you need to challenge the poverty, and they do not do that. So let us show you what the two options are. Is the aggression of expropriation without pay, which is grossly going to keep the poverty existent and largely unchallenged by the elitist nature of farming. Secondly, we have willing buyer, willing seller, which we agree does not work, because willing buyer, willing seller does not allow for the people to access that land and the means of production. So what do we bring then, because we seem to be saying to be naysayers, right? So what we do need to bring is a solution that is inclusive, one, but ensures skills transfer, but lastly, disassembles the elitist nature of farming. There's only one solution then to this, a community farming solution. So a mandate by the government so the government gives a mandate to farmers, right, to allow for claimants that are these people in this group to access the land through land sharing and farm sharing. So the farmer stays on that land, shares the profit of that land, but also shares the produce and the control of that land. So what this does is that it gives access to the people who are poor, disenfranchised, but also are descendants of distant people. So when you are descendant, you are sprawling. So there is no one person to bequeath a farm to, like in convention. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of people to bequeath a farm to. And when this happens, we must then unalienably give every one of those people a chance to profit in the means of production. But with their model, it still leaves the elitist part, that one member of that family is going to own that farm and inevitably leave the others in the cycle of poverty unfairly. So we cannot allow that to happen. And I'm going to move on to my next point about the elitism. Yes, closing.
Would you argue that that solution that you're proposing is proportionate to the harm that was done to these individuals?
Well, I think that is the craziest thing I have ever heard. Giving people a chance to gain wealth, giving a chance to get back their land that Shangadi says they cry for every day is proportional to being dispossessed and being massacred? Hell no. So let's move on, right? So the other goal of this group is agrarian reform. Reform about how the people engage with farming and how farming benefits society. Now we meet this goal because now farming becomes a societal event, an event that enriches the people that engage with it and positively makes those people better. We say agrarian reform then is reached in this way because you cannot reform an agricultural sector that is highly sanctioned, and thus the isolation from that cannot happen. So then what it means is that the elitist nature of farming, of giving one person a sprawling 50, 60, 100 acres is then minimized because now a family of dispossessed would meet with somebody who has had almost hundreds of years through his ancestors of skills in order to commercially produce goods, not just for themselves, but for those around them to consume. This means that we don't face the atrocities that were faced in Zimbabwe of giving somebody land and this person not being able to work the land. Even in South Africa this exists. They end up just selling the land back to whoever owned it. Then we face that problem and eradicate it because everyone has an incentive to work on that farm, has an incentive to make that farm better, has an incentive to make that farm profitable. So we minimize the elitist nature of farming and take it away, agrarian reform. What we do is we show that we can do this without isolating our farmers and poor people. Thank you.
Leader of opposition, we would like to welcome on stage the Deputy Secretary.
Sorry? No, it's a friend pronoun. All right. Mr. Chair, we think there's been a gross mischaracterization of this debate by Brigger here. And I think Brigger doesn't really understand the way the land reform has already attempted to work. And much of the analysis he's provided me already exists under the status quo. And it doesn't work, right? We say first and foremost, and I'll follow his arguments in order that they were given to us. And the first, the context of saying this, that in Namibia, our Article 16.1 states that everybody has the right to property, right? No disputing it, none of it. But the understanding under that article came with Article 16.2 that gave the state the power to expropriate certain property for the sake of redistribution and for the sake of the development of those people. Now, we didn't pick this out of our ears. This is an international principle recognized everywhere for good reason. Understanding the nature of colonialism, understanding the way in which our people perceive land, both in terms of their identities, their families, their histories, and their livelihoods, there was an important need to address these issues. And we think that Brigger fails to understand this fundamental point here today and attempts to mischaracterize at the first starting point our idea of aggression. We say that we follow the first principle of offering what he calls the passive solution because we cannot circumvent that. This is an entrenched part of our constitution that we cannot move away from, legally speaking, both in terms of our international agreements and what we believe are what we have here in our own constitution. We must take that step. Our aggression is in the second step. Once we've attempted to engage the system as it exists, we must take further action which is permissible to us to rectify the issue of force. And that's what Brigger fails to understand in today's debate, Mr. Chair. Right? We also have this argument that Shangadi somehow contends for elites by creating that, first of all, the high threshold of people who have loans. Again, Brigham fails to understand that in Namibia, the problem is not access to money for farming. We have specific state-run banks, such as AgriBank, that exclusively provide loans to these poor people to operate these agricultural lands and varying policies. The problem is access to the land in the first place. Money to farm means nothing if you have no land to farm on, Mr. Chair. And that's another very fundamental point of this debate that we think has been missed here today. Further, Shangadi was very clear. He talked about the high threshold only being for those who want to perform commercial works and not for the cabbage farmer. And that's only based on the demand for that kind of land, and it's based on the need to really strictly regulate this commercial work because of the high intensity of the work and what we need it for in our economy, which I'll dive into a little bit later. Mr. Chair, we further say that we heard that our policy leaves the horde of aggressors because we're passive. We think that this is not the fact of the matter. We say that we've seen this movement from 2001 develop over the years, and they completely desisted with all of their aggressive activity once they were put on the table with the powers that be and a comprehensive plan was drawn up. We see that once there was an idea of how we're going to get there, these people relaxed because they understand land reform is not going to come overnight, and so we cannot expect some immediate gratification policy as they're trying to attempt to plant on us here today. We think that that's just simply not fair. Take a moment. We also hear this idea of we need communal solutions. This is the counter solution from the opposition bench. Once again, we tell you that we have a communal land reform act. Everything that the opposition is talking about here today exists in the status quo. Because it's important to see. One, black people are restricted to communal lands where they cannot own property, where they cannot use it for collateral, and where they cannot grow crops to continue living their livelihood or developing for their families. We think that's a big problem, and that's part of the reason we have this current concern right now. Further, I would say for the second reason that most of these protests have arisen because of this dichotomy. This understanding that commercially viable and profitable land is restricted to a certain group, and the communal lands are strictly almost for the northern regions and for the tribal lands, and this is very problematic. It creates the problem we're trying to rectify here. We need access to commercial land, and we cannot just push people aside into communal areas and think they're going to be pacified by that. Further, Mr. Chair, we heard this attack on our 5-year policy for some reason, and we say a simple thing. We understand that land is a limited resource. We also understand that we need to care for it as best we can. And as much as we want to empower the people who are not empowered currently, we still need to create a means by which to incentivize them to continuously work for its development so that our land doesn't fall into disuse or into wastage. We think this 5-year plan is a good way of ensuring that from our side as government. And we don't think that it's some kind of mechanism that works against us today. I'll take you quickly before I move into my positive.
Do the Herero people want a commercial offering?
Do the Herero people want a commercial offering? Absolutely. All Namibian people want this commercial land. This is a big part of all of the claims. Every tribal chief we've seen thus far has made the same complaint. And it's fast becoming, moving away from this purely economic, land-based theoretical idea, and it's quickly moving in towards, you white people won't give us back the land of our ancestors. We're going to move you off it. We've heard this repeatedly from multiple tribe chief leaders, especially within the Herero community here in Namibia. We don't think that that's a question that comes with a no answer, which I presume you expected. Sorry. Right, Madam Chair, by way of positive analysis, we tell you just by this recharacterization, I tell you 2 points. One is this idea that the current regime is pegged with a lot of loopholes. It's extremely problematic. Besides the willing buyer, willing seller issue that Shangadi has already dealt with, we have the problem that what we have now is extremely susceptible to shocks. On the one side, expropriation is tied and bound by administrative restrictions. We see that the order in which action takes place allows people to nullify the decisions of this land redistribution process. We see that these things can be crippled by the failure to submit a single document. We see that oftentimes the people who can fight these things, and I cite the Nthoba case in this instance, which was even reported in international courts. In these instances, it was some minor technicality. The person whose land was all entitled, absolutely farmer, and all of a sudden, one of the case purely because of administrative technicality and overly complex legislation that we have. Secondly, we tell you that economic downturn even has an impact on our ability to redistribute under our current model. Currently, as we speak, expropriated land is being returned into the hands of the wealthy farmers because the black farmers who own them are default on the ability to pay because of economic downturn, and the people that take these lands from what we are the white farmers who are in the court. Completely circumventing the ideas that we have in our country. We need to address this, and we need to figure out what we can do. We tell you that these
economic output in this primary incentive. We see that our people, more often than not, because they have no access to land, are forced into these other industries, forced into urban areas, because they're told this is what you need to do to survive and subsist yourself. We say that that's not true. If we can create that access to that land, a lot of these people, as Shangadi is characterized for you here today, have grown up in these commercial entities, have grown up on this sort of agricultural lands, and these are the skills that they have. If they can gain access to that market, we create our employment for our people in fields that they wish to be in, and where they're most likely well-paid. We can then allow without necessarily compromising what we have worked on thus far. Madam Chair, it is for these reasons, Mr. Chair, let's continue this.
Prime Minister would like to welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition to flow in the first half of this meeting.
Native peoples have been displaced and disadvantaged for greater periods of time. We think that it's high time these people had access to their ancestral lands and means of production. We're happy to do so and give them in a method that satisfies three of these fundamental key areas. One, fair distribution or involvement of all the disenfranchised. Two, to give them this land or make them have access to this land in a way that ensures the longevity of the productivity of the land. Number three, that the people who access this land are able to get the most out of it. In this particular case, we don't think an aggressive approach meets the standards in any way. I'm going to prove to you how. Then I'll prove to you later why British model actually does meet three of these things, right? So firstly, we think that there isn't a proper characterization of what aggressive is, right? We don't think that taking the first step to say, let us negotiate and give you a fair amount of price is aggressive enough. What the motion suggests you do actually suggests that you take that step as a government or whatever authority as this movement of growth to say, we're taking this land from you regardless of whether you want to talk to us or you do not want to. We think that that's the spirit created by the motion, and that's what aggressive means, right? No, not yet. Sit down. So let me deal with first with some rebuttals, then we go to answering these questions. Number one, what does opening government tell us? They tell us that the land is given to those people who want to farm on a commercial scale, most probably. We think that that is very problematic because firstly, the people who make these demands in general don't have the mechanization to produce at a large scale. We think that taking an aggressive and abrupt approach actually then is to these people's detriment in terms of the productivity of the land. But secondly, we think that this thing ignores the minority of the people who do not feel that they have to feed Namibia and farm on a commercial scale, right? We don't cater for these people. Now the second point that they tell us, which we find very problematic in this debate, is the fact that every 5 years they review you and repossess the land if you do not perform accordingly, right? Firstly, we think that there's a dissonance between this particular approach and the spirit within which this movement wants to access the land. Because this movement sees this as ancestral land, right? They see this as a land that belongs to them regardless of whether they perform perfectly within 5 years or they do not in any case. So what you do when you say we're going to review you in 5 years and take this land from you, you antagonize these people, which leads directly to to what Brick has been telling you about elitism, right? When you take this land from these people, to whom do you give it to? Because these people are the ones who feel that this land is theirs and is like ancestral. So we think that that kind of dissonance makes you lose on that particular case. Now, the third thing that they tell us is that all those things that Brika talks to you about exist in the status quo. But what I'm going to respond to this is that, firstly, we do enough of our burden if we show you that the proposed thing that you want to do is harmful more than the status quo. But secondly, we're still happy to further incentivize the policy that Brika gives you, or to take any other approach within the status quo that is not aggressive in essence, or you think that what Brika is giving you will do just fine if you try, right? So the fourth thing that they tell us is the effect of economic downturn, how in the current status quo, black owners are returning land to white owners because they cannot be productive enough on them, right? That is his exact words. What we tell you is that in the instance that you then aggressively take the land from the people who currently use this land as a means of production right now and give it to these people, if the economy doesn't turn in any way, they're going to return all of that land, right? So what you tell us from your statement is that even if there's an economic downturn, the reason why these people are returning the land is because those who currently have the land right now can actually function within this great economy. So what Brika tells you is that the communal sharing of this particular land, to say if you currently own land now, then you rather share that land in a way, or also allow other people who are entitled to that land, to the profits that proceed from that land. Then you allow these people who know how to run these farms, even in the worst of economic times, to input their knowledge in that. And in that particular case, we think that these people who are also feel entitled to that land also like benefit from that means of production. Because what you have to understand when talking about issues of land is that land is not just only like sitting in this land, right? We talk of land in an economic concept in terms of that land is a means of production. So we think that once you involve these people in that particular means of production, you do a good thing to alleviate most of their concerns, right? So let's look at these three questions, right? Number one, the issue of fair distribution. Does aggressive reappropriation of land actually meet fair distribution? We tell you it doesn't, right? Because one, the spirit of aggression is very difficult to control because of like the issues of entitlement. So what happens is, as a government or as this particular movement, if you embark on aggressive reappropriation of land, what you do is you create some dissidents within that movement. People who feel like they're entitled to more land. At the end of the day, it becomes a license affair in terms of that whoever has the power to move the white man out of a farm gets to inherit that land. At the end of the day, you don't get fair distribution amongst all the people who aren't entitled to that land, all the people who call that particular land their ancestral land. We think that because it's very difficult to control the spirit of aggression and the spirit of entitlement, you are most likely not to satisfy everyone who feels like they want to be a part of those means of production, right? You fail on that. But secondly, on the longevity of production, right? Let's look at some context. Most of these people, according to the context set by opening government, are people who are poor, right? So they have they have little or next to no knowledge in terms of like mechanization or how to increase the productivity of that particular land. So we think that aggression reduces the level of cooperation that can probably be fostered between the people who currently own land now and the people that we wish to involve in this prospect according to Brika's policy, right? So you reduce that form of cooperation because of that aggression. And at the end of the day, you have people manning the land who do not have the necessary skill to survive because we think things have changed. But on the third point, right, getting the most out of the land, right? So we think that the means of production, ever since ancestral times and to currently right now, have improved and are different vastly. We think that we have other means of farming, means of mechanization, right, that are like more important in terms of like getting the most out of the land in the current status quo. We think that when you do this, when you like aggressively reappropriate the land, you send a message that you send a message of like stealing that land, or a message of like saying you're taking this land aggressively when you're not supposed to people who feel that they have invested and improved this land over ages and over time. So what you do in that instance is you create a form of dissonance between the people who feel that you're like what you have done is like immoral, and at the end of the day, you don't engage well with the international community in terms of exports and in terms of what sustains the economy, since it's an agrarian-based economy. What have you to give land to people in means that ensure that they have the longevity of the land and that ensures cooperation and transfer of skill. That's why we say buy in today into what Brika tells you. We're very proud to oppose.
thank the deputy leader of opposition, the left, the house, those in the audience, people of discussion, to the minimum effect, there shouldn't be any discussion. We'd like to welcome the member of government to extend the government speech.
When we talk about reparation, we need to make sure that when we are doing this, we do it in a way that is proportionate to the crime that has been committed against these people. Which is to say that when we're talking about reparation, it's not just about giving back, but it's about giving back in a manner that is proportionate to the crimes that were committed. A couple of points of clarity about it. What do we have on this side? Two things they tell us. Firstly, they tell us this idea of entitlement, right? And they tell you this idea that people are going to get very aggressive and they're going to force people to and they're not like, white farmers aren't going to buy into this idea, and because they have this sense of entitlement, people are going to not give back the land, essentially, right? We tell you then, extensively, that what the policy that we have proposed as inside is that one in which there is a lot of control, right? One in which is mediated by the government, and one in which white farmers can't just choose to not give back the land. But secondly, they tell us secondly of this idea of entitlement is that what it does is it enables people to just keep claiming back land, right? We tell you two responses to this. We tell you firstly, it's still important to give back land to people who have a historical connection to that land, right? We tell you that that policy ensures it. But we tell you that even in an instance in which this becomes a land grab and in which people are just grabbing land, we think it's still better and we think it's still then easier to consolidate land among people who have a historical connection to it than to fight for this land from white farmers, right? Which is to say that at a point where you are making the way up between a land grab between people who have that historical connection and a land grab between white farmers versus people who have a historical connection, we think that we would much rather prefer a world in which we are dealing specifically with people who have a historical connection to that land. The rest of our rebuttal is going to be integrated. What do we tell you on our side of the house? Firstly, we're going to characterize what reparation is and why it's so important that this reparation is proportionate, right? But secondly, we're going to tell you also why this is still good and why aggressive means are still far more effective than passive means. So, extensively, we tell you here that the land, firstly, you need to understand that in colonial times, land was taken forcibly from these people, right? We tell you that it was essentially stolen from these people. We tell you then that it is an act of reparations, then, and it's important then that we remember proportionality, and we remember that land ought to be given back aggressively, because it was taken back, because it was taken aggressively in the first place, right? We tell you we have accountability mechanisms to ensure that it is still a sustainable model, but we tell you that an aggressive approach is then inherently more legitimate, because the manner in which the land was taken in the first place was aggressive. No. We tell you secondly, this collectivized ownership model that they then bring up is far too passive, and it isn't one that is actual reparation, right? Because the land wasn't initially, because what initially happened is that people who had their historical connection to that land had ownership, which is to say that giving them communal ownership then isn't a form of reparation. The only form of true reparation then is correct ownership and full ownership. Secondly, we tell you that what colonialism and apartheid did extensively is that it systematically excluded these people from having financial prosperity. Let's look at why land is so important in the first place, right? We tell you that other than the things that opening government have told us, which is to say that it has ancestry and historical connection, which has also a means of financial prosperity, which is why white farmers have been able to be so financially prosperous, right? Because they're able to capitalize on that land and use it as a means of surviving in the capitalist built. We tell you then that when you give people access to that land, we tell you that's the only way you're going to ensure financial prosperity. We tell you financial prosperity is so important, specifically in the instance of reparation, because that is what reparation means. That's the kind of reparation that needs to be done, right? When colonialism and apartheid has systematically prevented these people from having financial prosperity. Let's look again at why the communal solution then doesn't work. Because even then, these people don't have control over the means of production. They don't have control over the kind of production that's happening and over the capital that's generated through this. Which is to say that they still don't have full control over the financial prosperity that that land has given them. Therefore, they're still disadvantaged within the system because unless they don't have full control over the financial prosperity of that land, just like the colonists had and just like white farmers still have, we tell you then it's still not an act of reparation. Lastly, we tell you that aggression is the way in which society is most likely to respond, right? We tell you that aggression is often the only way in which society is going to give this matter the kind of importance that it needs. We tell you extensively then that because the idea of reparation isn't contingent even on whether or not it's effective, we tell you all that matter isn't even relevant in the first place. But we tell you more than that, there are still checks and balances in place to ensure that there is still continuity, that there is still sustainability. Which is to say that we still will have sustainable model, but we think that still isn't contingent on whether or not we are to give reparation.
Would you call any Namibian who autonomously decides to opt into pacifism illegitimate?
No, so we tell you here that any Namibian who opts into pacifism is we tell you in this instance that in order for people to actually get the kind of reparations they need, we tell you that they ought to opt into an aggressive stance, right? So we tell you here that when you're specifically talking about a legitimate stance and when you're talking about a government putting in place a policy, we tell you in that instance the government ought to put in place a policy that is proportionate to the kind of reparations creating. Because ultimately, right, what this debate is about what kind of policy government ought to have in order to repay people who have been systematically oppressed, right? We tell you in that instance government ought to opt for one which is proportionate to the crime that was committed. Lastly, we tell you this idea that ultimately, even as it does create some kind of a discourse, we tell you that discourse is incredibly meaningful to their society. Specifically because even some kind of attention around this issue is again an act of reparation to a group of people who have had very little representation in media and in places where even people within the static bloc aren't aware of their struggle. So we tell you in an instance in which aggression is creating some kind of discourse, we tell you that's something that we value on our side of the house because we tell you even the recognition of that kind of struggle is an act of reparation and it's something that's important. But lastly, we tell you that this often manifests into some kind of a collectivized approach to actually giving back to these people what they ought to have, right? We tell you that what this does is it creates regional support and often international support for this movement. So we tell you that extensively an aggressive form of resistance, even in an instance where it's creating a lot of attention, we tell you that we value that kind of attention because that attention in and of itself is an act of reparation. But secondly, unless this issue doesn't get the attention that it needs, it's not going to gain the regional support, it's not going to gain the international support that is needed for us to actually take this movement and bring it to the next level. For all these reasons, I'm very proud of this.
Next, we don't have to respond to the willing buyer analysis from OG. We don't have to support that kind of principle. We don't respond to that. The rest of OG responses are integrated. CG, first, proportionality. If you don't achieve your aims, you don't achieve your proportionality. It's hinged on efficacy. You need to prove why you're effective. Reparation. If it's not effective, there is no reparation. So your principles of both proportionality and your principle of reparation requires the policy to work. You don't even achieve those aims. You have to prove that. And finally, they're telling you about legitimacy. There's more than one way to achieve legitimacy. just like Anam conceded. If you are a Namibian who autonomously opts for a passive approach, and lots of other Namibians buy into that, it is still legitimate. They don't represent the only kind of legitimate. Just because there is a sort of legitimacy doesn't mean we must opt into it. Ours is also legitimate in today's debate. They haven't proved why it isn't. I'm going to get into it. OO established already what our actual counter solution might look like. Let me rehash that. Post-settlement support to assist farmers, long-term stability and long-lasting change, and adequate and quality empowerment, which is fair. They haven't shown us how they can get any of those aims on their side. Moreover, they haven't really contested those aims from opening opposition. With us, we'd help a moderate number of farmers at a time and support them as a basic model. Argumentation, a lot of things to extend on. First, capacity. You must have the capacity to meet these aims. First side going to analyze why this capacity doesn't exist. Expropriation needs two things: post-settlement support and lots of different institutions working together to help out. They mentioned agri-bank. You also need regular banks and courts. You overburden all of those institutions when it occurs on a massive and large aggressive scale. You also aren't able to give these people post-settlement support. If you only expropriate 10 farms at a time, the government can take those 10 farms, give them to people of color, and then actively help them farm and teach them and so forth. When you have to do that to 1,000 farmers, you no longer have the capacity. So you scrap post-settlement support altogether. There just is no capacity for that policy. Comparative. We help some farmers progressively at a time, but it's effective. They help absolutely no one. Right? We also help institutions be holistic. Now, agri-bank can fulfill its daily functions whilst at the same time helping out this policy. You harm capacity. Second thing, negative sentiment. No, thank you. If it doesn't work, you just create and empower negative sentiment and racism. You allow racist people who sprout racist ideas to say black people cannot farm because it doesn't work. On our side, you discredit those racists. Yes, they'll say they'll be racist on both sides, but at least on our side, we discredit them. Moreover, actively discrediting a racist is important for both the reparation and the proportionality they ask for, and it helps you advance change at the end on the comparatively helpful negative sentiment. Next, let's look at the Namibian modus operandi at the moment. We'd say the current way Namibians operate is through instrumentalism and progressivism. They haven't changed every single German sign in the city, but they've changed a lot of them. They've taken another statue in front of the museum. They've put lots of powerful figures in front of Parliament. They instrumentally work toward progress, but it does happen. In Namibia, they get things done, unlike South Africa. Don't buy the characterization that if it's not aggressive, it won't happen. It is happening, but just slowly. We have seen Namibia move progressively. No, thank you. So the current Namibian modus operandi has proven that they can effectively do things instrumentally. Why are they changing a system that works in today's debate? Well, next, we'd say that if you do it too quickly, you would stand a chance of it being rejected by people. Look at changing the name of the Caprivian area to the Zambesian area, largely rejected by Caprivians. You did it too rapidly, you don't get the support of the very people that you're meant to. So on comparative, we get more support from people of color, and not just a minority group of people who form the UNAM organization. Surely you aren't prioritizing them over the masses. Those are a minority, another contextualization that's missing in today's debate. Okay, next thing I want to look at, the nature of aggressivism. Even if you concede that aggressivism in today's debate is simply asking, and when you say no, taking the money away from them, it will escalate by principle and strive. When you tell people we're going to be aggressive, you give them the expectation of aggressivism. When it doesn't arrive, they take it in their own hands, and that principle drives them forward to making it aggressive. So even though OG is not aggressive, eventually we'll get there. What else does aggressivism mean? It will be large, it will be rapid, and it will be public. If it's not, you aren't going to get any of those benefits. But what happens when it's large, rapid, and public? Most likely, dominant groups are the one that benefits. We've seen this currently in Namibia, where the dominant Tshiamo group had the most political power and the most capital within Namibia. When you do this rapidly, when you do this largely, and when you do this in the public, the Tshiamo are the most likely to benefit as the dominant group. When you do it privately, when no one knows about it, and you're doing it slowly and behind the scenes, you can make it more equitable and fair. Oh, it tells you about fairness. We actually analyze how we can really achieve that in today's debate. They also don't explain largely how we can achieve that. No, not yet. Next is reconciliation and long-term stability. This is the end goal, I suppose. You prevent future conflict over land, such as what happened now in Israel and Palestine, when you do it passively and both parties can engage in a reconciliating manner. Even if you succeed in your aims, in the long term there's a lot of instability. On our side, we aren't on either side of the extreme. We aren't supporting appeasement where we just let the white people keep the land, but we also aren't supporting progressivism, which would create long-term instability. We're somewhere in the middle where you achieve something, but in the long term, I'll take those in a moment. So we think that's potentially powerful. Next is shared equity. Now, OO did start to tell us about community farming and access to wealth and produce. But what else does shared equity mean? It means you have the assistance of white people, international institutions like the IMF, and people that have capital and capacity, and you need that to be effective. That's how you're effective. Foreign direct investment into farming in Namibia is a way in which farmers can get access. We think that when you create a situation that people are willing to share with those who are privileged and underprivileged, you can succeed, because the state doesn't have the capacity. But unfortunately, white people just do. Yes or no?
People won't support a movement that's contradictory, which is to say that if you concede that everyone deserves land and you're only giving 10 people land, people aren't going to buy into
But
that.
people won't see it as a contradiction. They'll know that everyone will eventually get land. People are stupid enough to think that just because you haven't changed everything instantly, it's automatically a contradiction. We argue that just isn't the status quo. So in terms of shared equity, in the long term you achieve more stability. But also there's less pressure on the state when the state doesn't succeed. You create more negative sentiment against someone like Mugabe when he tries too quickly and fails. If you succeed, people like your government. You stay elected. You don't elect someone who's more moderate at the end of the day. Also, you don't have Naunyango coming back later on and saying, hey, she will repay the white farmers. That's what happens when you do it too quickly and you rush it. Harm in the long term. Finally, let's take opening government at their best. Let's say they achieve their aims. Let's say this debate actually is about asking someone nicely, and if they say no, you take the money. Why is it still a problem? They would need a constitutional amendment, as they clarify, in order for them to achieve their goals. We wouldn't. That constitutional amendment is a lengthy process. They need to rally a lot of Namibians together before they can even start taking action. We can start taking action right now. And most importantly, they allow room for confusing, conflicting discourse, and infighting between tribes and races. We didn't allow it to happen when I was operating a tribe. I've given you 7 pieces of extension successfully in today's debate. I'm proud to oppose.
Except, don't look here. Pardon? What am I doing? Say hi to your people at the national stage, eh?
Does anyone have like lip balm?
Why are you putting my business in the streets?
Really?
Shangadi told you, government and banks are involved.
very proportionality. But regardless of that, we say the very principle of giving back to people what was wrongfully taken from them is exactly what we're standing for, and that's why proportionality stands. Again, what do they then tell us in this case? So that what they tell us is that one, we don't meet the objectives of expropriation because we need institutions to be involved, such as courts as well as banks, right? So, and the problem here is that we overburden these institutions when we include them in the process. Firstly, we say that it is the rightful mandate of these institutions to be a part of this. So one, even if this overburdens them, we say it's still a necessary mandate that they want to fulfill. But secondly, we say the problem of why expropriation of land has become so slow is because of this assumption that we overburden institutions. Institutions haven't done anything significantly to change the conditions of these people. We see this in South Africa, where people who make claims to land are somehow told that, well, your documentation was lost, sorry, we can't do enough for you. Institutions are actively not doing a lot to help these people. We say that overburdening them necessitates them to fulfill their mandate. We're okay with this, right? So the last thing that they tell us is that, listen, guys, we'd say that when you try to use aggression to make this faster in response to what Anam has told you, you guys only make this movement somehow rejected by society. We say that this is completely not true. We say current discourse in the regional sphere, when Namibia exists within SADC, is to want to give land back to their people. One, this was already started long time ago with Zimbabwe. Two, this is the current discourse in South Africa. We say this movement actively receives support from external bodies and domestic bodies from black people who are actively supporting this movement. We say that wanting to make it faster is only going to generate more support, and that's exactly what we're for. But the last harm of not making this faster is that white people who continue to establish themselves and improve and increase infrastructure in the land that they currently own make it much more difficult to get them out of that space once they've continued once their establishment. So that's to say that the boiling fire wouldn't say at all. Doesn't work. What this does is that this absolutely necessitates us to use aggression in order to necessitate these people to move on faster. So we say that current status quo, where white people have actively established themselves in these spaces, necessitates us to do this. So what we simply conclude here is that one, proportionality does stand despite the outcome, but two, we say that status quo necessitates us to use aggression in order to improve, in order to make this movement actively faster. So now that we've dealt with that, let's then move on to OO, right? And essentially, what we get from Briga, is a counter policy where he says, let people share farms so that we somehow have like a skills transfer. So the first question that we need to ask ourselves, here, is why is this not proportionate to the harm that is done? And here we need to ask ourselves, what exactly are these harms that exist? Harms that Anam has already told you. One, we told you about violent planning, where these people, land was actively stolen away from them, and they were forced to move into other. They were forced to migrate into alternative spaces, right? Secondly, Shangadi told you that these people are being separated from their ancestral land. Extensively, what we tell you is that these people are robbed of an economic assets. We say that land is a tool for farming and agriculture. We say that land is a tool for building infrastructure. The harm in this is that because they rob of such an important economic resource, they have less political capital. This means that government is less inclined to listen to them because they don't contribute significantly to the economy. This means these are people who actively live in horrible disenfranchised conditions. Therefore, why is Briga's solution not going to be successful or rather a legitimate panacea in today's debate? Firstly, because it doesn't allow for a practical and explicit loss of ownership on behalf of the white people. Because it says you can live in these farms and coexist with these people. The problem with this is that it doesn't take away from the idea that these individuals are colonists. It just says, as long as we get access to our land, it doesn't matter if we coexist with the people that planted it. This is not fairness. This is allowing people to live, to share what's such an economic resource with the very people that took it away from them who don't agree with this. The second half of this is that it allows whites access to the economic benefits that land particularly brings. Which really says, listen guys, let's just keep on sharing these economic benefits. We'd say at a point at which the black people who own that land, so I'll take you in a moment, Briga, at a point at which the black people who own that land who are actively excluded from the benefits that come from that, who don't support this. Yes, Briga.
Oh, so large and in the words. One ancestor, 500 descendants. Who do you give your big soul ownership to?
Let's then come to this point, right? So now that we have concluded why we don't support Briga's expropriation, why do we then extensively how this land is distributed, So this is what they tell us, both Tshiamo and Brits tell us about elitism as well as dominant groups. So firstly, like they told you, the problem here is not access to that land as well as division. The problem is financial establishment. So once we provide it, so essentially we could see what opening government said. But to other question on who gets this land, we say Namibians who simply have historical claim to it. That's how giving land back essentially works. You make a historical claim, we give you back the land. But assuming that there are in fact problems with dominant groups trying to get that land more, we'd say that one, that is relatively better than having to try to fight to get land from a white person than when we establish negotiations as to how to distribute it among ourselves as black people. Essentially, what do we conclude in today's debate? Bring a solution is harmful, but secondly, we say that proportionality as a principle does stand and move today's debate. Thank you.
The government would like your permission to go into this.
This debate distills into two issues. Firstly, is aggression a legitimate response for the issues faced by people currently? And secondly, what are the consequences of this aggression? The first thing I want to respond to under the idea of whether aggression is legitimate is the actual only real argument we get from the government bench from closing government. And that is the idea of proportionality. The idea that the harms brought upon these people centuries ago should be met with aggression itself. I have three responses to this. The first thing is that aggression and proportionality only mean something when you are effective at achieving that specific aim. Why is this the case? When we redistributed land in Zimbabwe, people wouldn't go, at least the Shona and Ndlovu people got their land back, but they were fundamentally fucked from the economy, right? So people require actual change to see that people there's been a correct redress in that harm. There's no reason to point out that there's been a principal change if you cannot prove that you've materially changed the lives of those people. Because the principle that affects them is the material inefficiencies and inefficiencies that they currently face. It is not some weird, way out principle that these guys can't even describe in today's debate. Second response to this argument. What do these people actually want? And I asked this argument way into, I think Andrew's speech, right? When I say, do these people want a principled response, or do they want an effective response to their specific policy, right? Why won't this be effective? Firstly, because you aggregate a large group of people in this country with vast amounts of power. Given that 5% of the population, which is like German Namibians and Afrikaners, control about 71% of the land within Namibia, you will cause huge capital outflows of this nation and ensure that they won't have the ability and reason to stay here. We think it can't be effective if there is people who fundamentally doesn't want to support the system anymore. These guys don't achieve that in efficacy. The last thing I want to do is this absolutely ridiculous thing that closing government then say, but it will be effective. We'll have banks giving people loans and government supporting this. There's one thing that banks require when they give people loans. That is a credit history, a credit record, where they can establish what the risk is of them giving that loan to that individual. You are giving loans to individuals who have absolutely no credit score or ability to show that they will be effective in operating that land in the first instance. This is a huge risk for banks, a huge risk for governments, who will not be able or willing to give these loans to people who they cannot conclusively prove will be effective in using this land in the first place. Why do we think this is the case? I think Tshiamo gives you a pretty good analysis on how this will be used. Because these guys say you're going to have huge, large commercialization of these farms in the first place. The problem is, most farms in Namibia are actually game farms, right? Used for tourist industries and hunting and so forth. Most of them aren't used for large-scale export agricultural industries. We think in that instance, you have to be real with yourself. None of these farms will become commercialized to the point that people can actually benefit from them. The second argument I want to talk about is their general thing about legitimacy that we hear from opening government here. They talk about genocide. They talk about the fact that these individuals are dispossessed, and they talk about, the fact that most of these farms are on burial sites of these individuals. Now, here's where the aims outcomes thing doesn't really ever happen, right? So they say they aim to redress this by doing certain things, but they propose that these individuals ask for it first. I don't understand how people whose ancestors have been murdered, whose lands have been built on burial sites, must ask for this first. If your aim is to principally redress the pain that these individuals feel, why would you tell them they must ask for it first in the first instance? I don't understand why that outcome is legitimate. But also, under this side, Shangadi gave us like 5 minutes and strands on strands of material and context, and they never actually linked that to why that requires this policy to be aggressive in the first instance, right? So we can concede to everything they tell us about context, but still say in this debate why that necessarily should not be aggressive in this instance. No thank you. Then they talk about the failures of the current system. They talk about administrative things, willing buyer, willing seller. I have one question to ask in this regard. What is more difficult to do? Changing a law that is in its infancy, given that Namibia only got its independence in 1990 and the law still needs a lot of development and reform, or aggressively doing this and putting all these courts under a backlog and the ability for them to actually do this policy is significantly restricted. We think it is absolutely the former, having the ability to change these administrative backlog and little niggles that exist within the system currently. I'll take the opening.
All the aggression you talk about in today's debate only occurs where individuals don't have access to the land and don't receive it. Our model, under all instances, even the worst one, the ownership of land is transferred. Aggression won't occur.
Yeah, but you are the one who had the burden to prove that this is aggression in the first place, right? You haven't sufficiently done that. Ours was not to prove that there will be some sort of aggression in the first instance, but to prove that there are alternatives that can work to achieve exactly the same outcomes. Then we want to talk about racial tensions, because I think this is largely a part of the debate that was grossly not analyzed. The first thing I want to say to this is that no one will want to talk to people, they want to talk about discourse amongst people, who are coming with an aggressive approach. Why? Because fundamentally in transitional justice, how you transition from a period of war to a period of peace, instability to stability, you need power sharing amongst those individuals. But no one's going to be willing to sit around the table where they know they cannot refuse the offer of that individual, even if they have the ability to barter with them. No one's going to say, at least I am negotiating and there is some discourse, but I cannot refuse this person's offer in the first place. The discourse that these guys create has absolutely no meaning. The second thing I want to say to this is that Andrew concedes to the fact that the LPM has changed its policy from being really aggressive to actually being more passive in this instance, right? This relates also to our extension about how these individuals are passive. He says, when they came to the table, they changed the entire approach to become more approachable to these individuals. They need to then show us why in that instance this would change under the status quo and would make them more aggressive again, right? To revert back to their old policies. Lastly, I just want to show you all the host of things that closing government and opening government don't respond to. Tshiamo talks about the negative sentiment that you create and racism within the country. He talks about the institutions that have been overburdened in the state. He talks about why instrumentalism and progressivism has worked in Namibia in many instances to achieve the same aims. He talked about the fact that the Oshabangu people will disproportionately value and benefit from this policy. And he talked about the fact that there will be no reconciliation. To this end, we have had no responses. I'm incredibly proud to stand on behalf of Big Boy and New York. Thank you.
We thank the opposition whip and the rest of the speakers for the debate. We cause the flushing ends and water.
commentary, guys. How's that? How's that? You're live. How's that? How did you like that? You're live. Hey. How's that, Anam? Ivan. Angie, how did you like that?
It's just myself.
Shame. Fish. You're live. Say hi to your people. TT in the building.
What's happening?
Out there. Briga gave the speech of his life. He was there.
Do the things.
Do the things. And Endra's also in the house.
Right, things have to be done.
The things that need to be done. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back for your session with the results giving. Best of luck to your candidates and best of luck to the people that you are rooting for. This is the Harambee Prosperity Debate Cup Finals.